Pittston, Maine, the Reuben Colburn house. Start point and jumping off point for Benedict Arnold's legendary expedition in the ill-fated attempt to take the city of Quebec, 1775, during the American Revolution. Pittston, Maine. Here we are. It's Matt Keister, digital field trip here at the Arnold Trail. So this here is the Reuben Colburn house. It's a state historic site. See the barns right there. See the house in the background. It was built in 1765, and it was pivotal in the American Revolution. Now, Colburn was an acquaintance of George Washington. And in 1775, when the decision was made to attack Quebec, Colburn was involved. He was ordered by Washington to build 200 bateaux, which they built in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, they built 200 bateaux. The problem was there wasn't enough seasoned wood, so a lot of them were green. So if anybody knows anything about the Benedict Arnold expedition, they had problems with the boats for most of the journey. But September 22nd, 1775, this was the jump-off point for Arnold's expedition. They arrived here after having come from Massachusetts, Newburyport, Massachusetts. They snuck out because they were worried about the British fleet catching up with them. So upon arriving here, there were 200 bateaux already waiting for them. Now, bateaux are long wooden riverboats that had been used for hundreds of years on the Kennebec River and other rivers here in Maine and Canada by loggers and so forth, but they were not really applicable to the great carrying place and the miles of swampy wilderness that Arnold's men were going to have to carry them through. Now, here behind me, you see this is a wooden bateau. This is a model of a wooden bateau that would have been used on Arnold's expedition. So 200 of them were constructed from green lumber here on this point. Now, one of the problems they ran into apparently was they didn't have enough nails. So they had to scrounge everywhere for nails when they did this. There wasn't enough seasoned lumber, so a lot of them were built green. So they're quite large boats. Pretty good for negotiating rapids, for carrying things. And what we have to remember was that Arnold's army was an army in march. It wasn't just the basic equipment the men carried. They had tents, they had food, they had provisions, gunpowder, shot, cannons, all those different things that were required. They had a paymaster's chest, right? So all those things that were required for an army to effectively fight, all right, made the journey with Arnold from this point. So as we get into the story here of Arnold's march, one of the things to remember is that Arnold's boats were fairly ineffective. The route that they moved was based on a map. It was known as Montresor's map. And it was an engineer who had plotted out what was called the Great Carrying Place. So the Great Carrying Place was the route, the Chaudière-Cartier up the Kennebec, over across the Dead River system to the Great Carrying Place to the Chaudière-Cartier, which led directly to Quebec. Now, the map had a lot of inaccuracies. In terms of distances, Arnold greatly underestimated the distance, greatly underestimated the amount of supplies that would be needed for the process. Now, Benedict Arnold had gotten his hands on a map that was made by John Montresor. Now, Montresor was a British military engineer who had mapped out the headwaters of the Kennebec River, the Great Carrying Place, and the height of land with the carrying route over to the Chaudière-Cartier, which led directly down to Quebec. Now, Reuben Colburn had also asked for a local surveyor to help Arnold, and his name was Goodwin. Now, the problem with Samuel Goodwin was that he was known to have loyalist sympathies. So much of the information that he gave Arnold in terms of distances and miles and campsites was fairly to very inaccurate and vague enough so that it was going to complicate Arnold's mission. As we see Arnold's army depart, the next stop for his forces was going to be Fort Western in the head of navigation and the site of the old original Cushnock trading post on the lower Kennebec.